Hi, I'm Ian and welcome back to Astro Time Traveller. It's early September here in the UK and we're getting some hot sunny days, which is a big change from the last few months when we've just had a pretty poor summer, and hopefully we'll have some clear nights. So back to astro photography hopefully tonight. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the plan mode in the ASIAIR Pro. So this episode is going to show you how to do that and what the resultant image might look like. I'm going to try and do the Veil Nebula, but I'm going to split it into the eastern and the western veil through two images and then pull them together after stacking them into a single image and process them through PixInsight and through Photoshop. Now, to plan all of this, I'm going to use Telescopius to put in the coordinates of what the Veil Nebula will be, so I can organise how I put in the two coordinates for the two images I want to take into the plan mode of the ASIAIR Pro. I think I've got to be careful about the angle of rotation that I have on the field of view of my camera, so I'm trying to be as careful as I can with that to make sure that looks appropriate in Telescopius. But I'll show you how that works, and then I'll show you how to put the coordinates into the plan mode of the ASIAIR Pro and then set up my telescope and take the images. I'm doing this because I'm getting a Skywatcher Esprit 120 in the autumn. I've got it on back order and it should come by about the end of October. And I suspect with a field of view of focal length of 840, some of the targets are going to be too big for this telescope. So I may want to take a series of images and then stitch them together. So I'm doing that tonight to practice, even though my current telescope, which is the Skywatcher EvoStar 72ED, with a focal length of about 376, I probably could just about get the whole Veil Nebula into it. But I wanted to try this technique to see if I can, using the stitching method, do two images and pull them together. So it's quite exciting. We'll see how it goes. I'll take you through each of the steps and hopefully we'll end up with a good image at the end. And if you enjoy this video, and if you've seen some of others on how to use the ASIAIR Pro, or just some on the targets that I show, the nebulas and the galaxies with some cool music with them, then please subscribe and hopefully you enjoy this channel. So let's see how it goes. Fingers crossed we can make the plan mode work for the ASIAIR Pro. So here we are in Telescopius, and here's the telescope settings, which show the focal length of the 72ED, 376 millimeters, about a 3-inch aperture, and no Barlow, so just at 1. And then when we move into the camera settings, you need to put in there your sensor size and your sensor resolution. But the important thing is to get the position angle. So you need to estimate what your camera is versus the vertical, and I've got it at 65.8. I think it actually came out a little bit less than that in the actual final images. And then when you actually do the mosaic settings, I've got 2 across and 1 down. Here you can change how much overlap you want, and this will show you the coordinates in the RA and the deck below. But the good thing is you can go back onto the actual image and you can start moving around to exactly place where you want to the target that you want to take. So I'm just moving it around. It gives, each time you go back, it will give the new coordinates of what you're taking. And you can also play with the overlap. So you can see I've got 20% there, but I can move it around and have a bigger overlap. Again, that can help you on your framing of how you want the image to be in the total picture that you're going to take when you combine the two individual images. So I'm just playing around a little bit to get that as best coordinated as I can. And that'll give me my final coordinates. I take a picture of that and then I can use that to set up the plan. So here is the setup for tonight. So this is my EvoStar 72ED Skywatcher telescope, and at the back of that I have the 0.7 focal reducer, and on top of it I have the ZWO 280mm guide scope connected to the ZWO 120mm guide camera, and connected at the back is my ZWO 294 MC Pro one-shot colored camera. And the important thing is to get the angle of attack of the camera, which I think is 55 degrees off center, to help set up with the Telescopius setting I have for the panes I'm going to take of the nebula. And then all of that will be run through with the ASIAIR Pro, which will run the plan this evening, and all of that is situated on the Skywatcher EQ6R Pro mount. So I've just got to put on the G straps a bit later, and then we're ready to start imaging. So here we are in the home screen of the ASIAIR Pro. So click on the options, and when we do that, we'll select plan. We go into the plan mode, click the three lines, and you go into this setup screen where you can now put in the title of what you want to do for this particular image. Let's call it the Veil Nebula, and we'll call it 2 panes because I'm going to do 2 images. And on here you have a selection of things that include when you're going to start, and whether you use the meridian flip, if you turn off the calling camera or go to the home position. But if we click on the go back button, you get on the plus. Here I'm going to actually put in the Veil Nebula, so I'm going to use the NGC 696, which I've previously used. So it goes into that, and then click on the imaging, and I'm going to put in 300 seconds, and probably let's do 35 images. So we'll click on that, and then I'll come back in a minute and actually change the RA and DEC. But let's put the second set of data in. So again, I'm just choosing from my previous list of nebula that I've looked at, the same Veil Nebula. Click on that, and it will then put that in there. Click on the plus button to put in the exposure sequence, and again 300 seconds, and I'm going to do 35 exposures. So click on that. So that's put in the 2 elements that I wanted to do from Telescopius. Now let's go back into the first one, and let's just change the RA and the DEC coordinates to fit with what came off Telescopius. And you can see down the bottom you have some roles that you can actually change the individual hours, minutes or seconds to what you want. So I just need to change that round to, I think it was 20, 54, 11 for the RA. When you've done all this, the top right hand kind of return circle, you'll need to click that to make sure you reset this particular element, otherwise it will go back to the original coordinates. So again, now I'm just doing the DEC and just changing that to the right final coordinates. And as I said, once you've done all that, you need to press that top right hand circle return button to save those particular coordinates, otherwise you'll lose them. But once you've done that, you've got the kind of first pane done. So I can now click on that and return. One thing you can do is add a delay timing. So when you actually start the whole process, you can put in a number of delay seconds. So I'm going to put in 30 seconds delay here. Just make sure you can just check everything's fine before you walk away, and leave your ASIAIR Pro to run the whole sequence through the night. So that's the first one done. So that's what I call plan 1. So I click back on the green button to activate it, unclick on the plan 2 because I'm going to change the coordinates, go back in and start doing that. So again, just changing these coordinates from the ones I took a picture of earlier from Telescopius to make sure I get the right coordinates. So putting both in the RA and then putting in the DEC. So it only takes a few seconds to do this, and you can do this offline. You can do it earlier in the day. Clearly you need to be connected to your ASIAIR Pro, but you don't need to do it at night. You can do it well beforehand when you've done your planning of your session. And again, I'm just going to put a short delay on this one. Maybe I'll just do 15 seconds. This will be running through the middle of the night. And then press that top right hand circle, go back to the main screen, click on the green tick button so it's all activated, and just confirm the final settings for that target name and sequence. I'm actually going to take off calling the camera because I leave that on until I wake up in the morning. So I set all this up and then I just go to sleep. So now we're pretty much done on that front. So this would be your final screen, and you return to home, and in the night you'd press the go button. And that's what I've done. So now we're in the live mode. I pressed the go button some time ago. It's now counting down to the last 10 seconds or so of my first 300 seconds. And as you can see, it's about to pop up the first image. The guiding's going not too bad. And once it finishes, as with the ASIAIR Pro, you'll see it will start to load the image. Here it is, it's loading it. I had Vega on there before, and there's my first image. And there we are, that's the Western Veil Nebula. So that looks like it's come out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with how that looks. I can just look at the whole screen to see if that looks good, and I could close in and look at the individual stars, but I can also do the star count. So there we go, 2.07 I think. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good stars for my location, which tend to range between 2 and 4. I'll try and do if it tells me what the targets are, but it's looks like it's a bit delayed on doing that. So we can come out of that, but we can always do the crosshairs just to see how the targeting is going through the night. So that's it. So it started to run. I can now pretty much go off to sleep and leave it running for the rest of the evening, and it will continue to do that throughout, and without very little monitoring. You can see down the bottom it will do a meridian flip in a few hour and a half's time, and it will do that perfectly. And as always with the ASIAIR Pro, you can play around with the histogram to make it darker or lighter so you can see the image. The Veil Nebula is quite bright, so you don't really need to do that for this particular one, but it's a useful function for some of the more darker nebulae that you might get. So that's as it was for the first session. And then you can see my guiding. This is now the multi-star guiding with the ASIAIR Pro. That's going well, so I'm getting pretty good guide rate there, about 60 I think. So very happy with that process, and leave it through the night. So here we are a bit later in the night, 1:40 you can see at the time. So it's just completing the first image that I'm seeing of the Western Veil. So it's just loading it up, and we'll see what that looks like. It's actually the 14th image that it's taken that evening, but I've been asleep for most of the time, and I've just come down and seen it, and oh, there we go. So there we can see the Western Veil. So that looks like everything has worked. The plan's gone as I wanted it to. It's moved on from the first pane, the image I was taking of the Western, onto the Eastern Veil, and that seems to have worked out pretty well. So I'm pretty happy with how that looks, and I'll leave it now running for the rest of the evening. And now all I need to do is in the morning do my calibration frames and check out which of these frames I want to actually process. But very happy with how that's gone, and good first use of the plan mode. Here I am in the morning. I'm now using subframe selector in PixInsight, and this is the first set I took of the Western Veil, which I call Plan 1, and I'm just looking at both the FW HM sequence to see what that looks like, but mostly I'm going to look at the stars, because that's usually what I tell, and I'll just move on to the stars and same with the graph, so we can see what the average is there. And what I will do is remove all of the ones with the weakest stars in it. And what I do generally is I take a note from subframe selector and write down the number that I might want to take out, 10 or 20 frames depending. Here I'm probably going to take it about 10 frames and leave the top 25. But clearly you should make sure you do ones that have the best stars in them as all. But I write these down here, and then I will compare them to what I get in Deep Sky Stacker, and another process I can go through to see what the star count is there. And using both of those, I can then eliminate a number of the stars that I don't want. So I'm pretty happy with how that's gone. Now you can see I'm into the second plan, and again I'm just looking at that, and I think there were some occasions where the stars were really bad towards the end. That's probably because some cloud came over. So I'll write down which ones here are the weakest for the star count, and then compare that again when I go into Deep Sky Stacker. So when I actually do my stacking, I'm only going to stack the best frames that I can tell from doing the stars count. And in Deep Sky Stacker, I'll combine those with my flat frames, which I'm now doing auto flats. If you looked at my last video, I showed you how to do those, and also my auto dark flats together with a dark master frame to actually consolidate and get my overall stacked image. But that's using the subframe selector in PixInsight. And then similarly, I go on into using Deep Sky Stacker, and here's my plan one. So copy the light frames into there, check all of them, and then just go into check the number of stars in the field. Happy with all that, so I can now process that so it will do a count. I'll jump ahead to when it finishes, so it's just about to finish, and there we go. And you can see I've got the star count there, and if I go down the bottom, I can see the ones that have the weakest star counts, and therefore what I'll do is I'll note down those compared to what was in subframe selector and eliminate the worst of those images. And again, I'm probably going to eliminate about 10 here, so I keep 25 images to stack, because overall they look pretty good throughout the night. And then this is my plan 2, so this would have been the Eastern Veil Nebula, and doing exactly the same, processing it through, getting an output of the stars that it counts, and here we go, it's just completing that. And again, I can go down and look through all of those and decide which one of those in combination with the subframe selector from PixInsight I'm going to eliminate and leave my top 25 stars overall. Now the other thing I often do is use Astronometry.net, which again you can download your FIT files into this software, and it will tell you the location, the size, the radius, the pixel scale, etc., and the orientation, which is quite good. And you can also look at it annotated, where it will try and show you what it thinks are the actual nebulae or targets you've got in your image. So that's quite useful. Or you can also use the grid version to see exactly where it was on the grid. So you can just see that there. So again, it's another useful thing to use. And what I tend to do is I copy these into a Word document and I save them. So there we are with the Western Veil. And then likewise, there's the same image copying across for the Eastern Veil. You can see I've got the amp glow on the right hand side of the image because these are unprocessed. This is just a single FIT file that's come across for analysis, but you can see that looks pretty good. And it's useful data to go back to when you want to reframe your target in the future. You've got a good reference with all the detail here to know exactly what you took through that exposure. So here I am from PixInsight. Now I'm going to use Image Composite Editor, which is a software free from Microsoft, and I'm going to load up my Plan 1. This is now my stacked image that I've done, and Plan 2, so that I can combine the two. So if I load both of those up, there they are, they've come across. So I select both of those and I just simply click on the top stitch button and it will stitch that straight away. You may have seen this on my moon mosaic video, but here we are, they're not even got any stretch on them, but they're still able to stack, and there you can see they're stacked in there. So now we just need to crop the edges. So if we go across to cropping, and you can see in real time this is done very quickly. So I just bring the edges in on both sides just a little bit. So that's done, and then I'm ready to go into export. So it's incredibly fast process to do for these two images. I'm going to want to save these not as a JPEG but as a TIFF file, so I can use them in PixInsight. So I'll go back, it says it's stretched, so stitched, so I'll just keep it as that. So if I save that, and again it'll just take a few seconds, you can see this whole process has literally taken less than a minute probably to do, and now I'm ready to go into PixInsight and look at the overall images. So there they all are. So let's go into Plan 1, the first set of images. So if we upload that, what we can do is just do a stretch on that, and then once that is stretched, there we go. So we can see the Western Veil Nebula, the Bat Nebula as it's sometimes called. So if we put that up in the corner, we can then add to that my part 2, which is the second frame. This is now stacked and calibrated, same as part 1. And if we stretch that, there we are. Then we have the Eastern Veil Nebula, and you can see there's some overlap there. So hopefully the stitch will have worked. I think it did because it all seemed to be okay. So if we just size those to be comparable on the screen. We'll get to see all three of these images together, which will be quite good. And then finally, let's open up the combined image. So the one that we will be working for using the plan and the stitching process. So there it is. So we'll just move that across and let's just stretch that, and we should see the two images combined, and there they are. And if you look in detail, you can't see, as they say, you can't see the join. I think when you move into a close star field, it all looks very good. And clearly, having joined it at this stage, we can now do all of our processing through PixInsight on this one single image without having to do anything stitching them together later. So I'm just going to orientate it round, say 90 degrees anti-clockwise. That's how I want to look at the image. And if I just pull that across so I can fully see it, there it is. So there's a bit of cropping to be done and all the processing to be done, but that's it. So very impressed with using the ASIAIR Pro plan mode, enabling me to stitch two images together to get a really good full image of the Veil Nebula. Now I'll show you the final image that came out when I finished all the processing.